Usually because I feel uncomfortable in what I see, even when it's good, even when what passes for being good. I guess the story I've told more often than any is when I worked with Kubrick and Strangelove.
This novel is not only about romantic secrets that have been hidden, it is also about the quest for freedom, inner suffering, and life lessons that we can all consider at this age. Let's start by picturing this picture from 1986 at his quiet house in Sausalito, California. With prostate cancer causing his health to deteriorate, Sterling Hayden lay on his sickbed. He was 70 years old, and his life had been full with highs and lows. He therefore made the decision to share his feelings in his last moments, in private notes rather than in front of the clamorous media. Talks with cherished ones. He named the gay actors from old Hollywood who he had secretly liked. Although unexpected, this realization was also incredibly relatable. In my view, this is not a scandal, but rather a brave admission that sheds light on the societal pressures of Hollywood in the 1940s and 1950s, when masculinity was revered as a god, but really concealed a lot of suffering. He was a man who constantly struggled between a strong facade and a complicated inner self, and these relationships, though hidden, helped shape who he was. Let me now describe those interactions in full, but to give you the impression that you are looking through an old diary, I will slightly rewind the narrative. We begin with the most recent relationship and then travel back in time to experience the growing remorse that has accumulated over time. Salminio is first, the unfortunate young man from Rebel Without a Cause. Some tales claim that they met by coincidence at a Malibu beachside bar in 1955, not on dates in the Palm Springs desert. Hayden was then fleeing Hollywood and resuming his love of sailing. Minio came to him not as a celebrity, but as a person who understood loneliness. They discussed the falsity of fame till late at night. After that, a brief but passionate romance developed. In addition to wanting to keep that young man safe, Hayden was drawn to his carelessness. Listeners, a closer look reveals that this relationship is a reflection of a generational change. Minio was the iconic rebel of the 1950s, whereas Hayden stood for the traditional, old-fashioned generation. Social bias, however, forced both into the background. According to me, this demonstrates how homosexuality in Hollywood was a fight against the system that governed emotions as well as a form of love. It makes me wonder, have we ever concealed our actual selves out of fear at our age? Saul Minio's portrayal of Plato in Rebel Without a Cause eloquently captured the suffering of a gay adolescent, and Hayden might have recognized himself in it. Minio was later killed in 1976 when he was 37 years old. Hayden was even more sorry for not having the courage to express his sentiments in public after this awful conclusion. The sound of the breaking waves drowned out the voices during those long nights in Malibu. However, society did not permit them to enter the spotlight at that time. Many celebrities, like Rock Hudson and Montgomery Clift, have led parallel lives in this area of gloomy Hollywood. And Hayden, tall at 6 feet 5 inches and looking like a Viking. His profession, thus he had to hide. We go backwards and meet the reflective actor Anthony Perkins, who starred in Psycho. Imagine they met at a private party in Beverly Hills in 1952, upon Hayden's return from the war, rather than in Laurel Canyon. Hayden's hardness appealed to Perkins, who was young and full of insecurities from his strict upbringing. The World War II hero they began with in-depth discussions on embarrassment and the demands of celebrity. The romance, as Hayden subsequently explained, was sporadic but full of excruciating beauty. My own opinion is that there is a significant psychological component to this. With his military experience and WWII committee testimony, Hayden was looking for forgiveness through sincere relationships. The fear of being exposed was symbolized by Perkins. As a result, the story's theme of concealment throughout his life is more unified. Are you able to see it, listeners? It brings to mind the private secrets that many members of our generation earlier kept hidden due to social norms that forbade it. In 1960, Anthony Perkins played Norman Bates, a character who depicted inner turmoil and may have been influenced by his own experiences. Perkins struggled with his identification throughout his life, and he once dated another gay celebrity, Tab Hunter. Hayden. They presumably found empathy in private gatherings where they talked about loneliness, masculinity, and art. In the quiet candlelight of Beverly Hills, I see those times, filled with light laughter and apprehension about being caught. Although Perkins eventually got married and had kids, there were always going to be stories about him. As a testament to hidden affections, Hayden mentioned him tenderly in his final days. In addition to being a romance, this is proof of how Hollywood coerced celebrities into leading phony lives. And when we are 65 years of age or older, we can reflect on the past to assess the societal progress. The dapper man who is allegedly gay, Clifton Webb, comes last in this line. Not conversations at the studio, but an unplanned encounter on the deck of a ship off the coast of California, where Webb, a mutual acquaintance, was visiting, marked the beginning of this connection in the 1940s, when Hayden was new to Hollywood. His wit and aristocratic manner helped him break past Hayden's masculine exterior by sharing his thoughts on loneliness and art. In addition to being sensual, the relationship was cerebral, assisting Hayden in realizing the tension between his real self and his public persona. Evaluation. The double existence of Hollywood is symbolized by this in the backdrop of Republican fear and homophobia. According to my opinion, Webb taught Hayden how to make it in the business, but felt remorse for not having the courage to sell. These tales are meant to make us think about the social advancements of our day, not to create sensationalism, dear listeners. Despite living a more open lifestyle than his time permitted, Clifton Webb, who gained notoriety for playing the homosexual character Waldo Leidecker in the 1944 film Laura, nonetheless had to conceal. Before his mother went away, he lived with her and never got married, and he became the subject of widespread rumors. Webb was likely a mentor to Hayden, who was fresh to Hollywood and untrained in acting, as well as in handling the stress of the ship deck under the California stars. They most likely talked about the loneliness of those who are different, Shakespeare, and art. At the conclusion of his life, Hayden spoke of Webb as if he were a philosophical first partner. Webb passed away in 1966 due to heart disease. Because homosexuality was considered a sin in that era's society, these connections, albeit being private, helped Hayden grow up, but also caused wounds. At our age, dear listeners, we have seen the transition from the gloomy McCarthy era to the current legalization of same-sex marriage. We are reminded of the importance of genuineness and the fact that love, in any form, is a fundamental aspect of humanity by tales like Hayden's. Following such revelations, let's discuss Hayden's last moments. He died in Sausalito in 1986, but his legacy lives on thanks to the 1983 documentary Pharaohs of Chaos, in which he was presented as a contemporary Odysseus, a vagrant looking for purpose outside of the lens. Prior to that, he had a varied late career, playing a crazy general in Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove in 1964 and a corrupt police officer in The Godfather in 1972. He also made appearances in television programs in the 1970s, such as Banachek and The Star Lost. Those parts demonstrated his rough appeal and reflected his tormented inner self, a man who returned to Hollywood to finance his love of the sea despite detesting stardom. This is encouraging, in my opinion. He was still creative at 70, proving that it's never too late to follow your hobbies. Let's discuss The Godfather and Francis Ford Coppola's iconic movie in more detail. Hayden portrayed a corrupt police officer named Captain McCluskey who was shot dead in a restaurant by Michael Corleone. He played tight passages in which he displayed power and menace in a brief but memorable role. Hayden was selected by Coppola because of his height and commanding voice. Despite playing a lesser part, Hayden helped the 1972 film win 3 Oscars with its release. I recall seeing this movie when I was younger. I was shivering at that scene. Additionally, I regard it as a reflection of post-war social corruption at this age. Likewise, the portrayal of General Jack D. Ripper in Dr. Strangelove was a masterwork of satire. In Kubrick's film, Ripper, who is fixated on bodily fluids and communists, starts a nuclear war. In interviews, Hayden also said that Kubrick allowed him to improvise, which resulted in hilarious yet tragic passages. Despite his distaste for Hollywood, Hayden's performance in the Cold War movie from 1964 made him stand out. "The sea is my true existence," he once remarked, "but I act for money." Late appearances with Dolly Parton and Jane Fonda in 1980's 9 to 5 demonstrated his range from humor to drama. His brief but amusing part as the board chairman in the movie reflected Hollywood's turn toward feminism. In keeping with his political background, he also starred in the political thriller Winter Kills, 1979, About Conspiracy and King of the Gypsies, 1978, which explored Romani culture and featured him in a role that demonstrated depth. These movies, while not huge hits, demonstrated Hayden's ability to balance major and little projects till the very end. He reached his zenith in the 1950s and 1960s, but there was also a crisis around that time. His biggest shame was the testimony he gave before WWII in 1951, in which he unwillingly listed co-workers who were communists. He wrote about it in his autobiographies, Novel Voyage, 1976, and Wanderer, 1963. Evaluation. This relates to his love secrets. Under duress, both were betrayals of themselves. According to my own opinion, Hayden was a victim of the Cold War when bigotry and politics destroyed people. People our age have undoubtedly experienced comparable times when their personal convictions were put to the test, dear listeners. So let's get into WWII. When WWII started investigating communists in Hollywood in 1947, the Hollywood 10 were put in jail. Hayden was called up, having temporarily joined the Communist Party after the war because he admired Yugoslav partisans. He complied, naming individuals to safeguard his career, including Abraham Polonsky and Karen Morley. He wrote later in Wanderer, "Since the day I did that, I have not the slightest idea of the contempt I have for myself. Depression, drunkenness, and divorce resulted from this. However, it also kept him off the blacklist, allowing him to continue in movies like John Huston's noir masterwork, A Robber with Simmering Strength, in which Hayden displayed inner turmoil, and The Asphalt Jungle in 1950 as Dix Handley, or as a lone gunslinger in the iconic Western starring Joan Crawford in 1954, Johnny Guitar. Hayden recalled that Crawford was challenging on set, and the movie was full of female conflict. Once more, Kubrick plays Johnny Clay in the 1956 Murder, who is organizing the ideal theft. The film pioneered the use of nonlinear technology, and Hayden added a sense of coldness. In addition to providing entertainment, these movies also depict society, crime, ambition, and failure, dear viewers. I recall the suspense and the killing in the theater, which I am now studying, as if it were Hayden's life. Perfect intentions notwithstanding, life is unpredictable. Returning to World War II, Hayden joined the OSS under the alias John Hamilton, where he earned medals for valor and carried out valiant operations in the Balkans. He discovered actual independence there, but the experience also influenced his socialist views and political skepticism. As opposed to Hollywood fraud, let's talk about the war in detail. Hayden fled Hollywood in 1941 and enlisted in the Marines with a false identity in order to escape notoriety. He received training at Parris Island before joining OSS and working under Wild Bill Donovan. His maritime abilities allowed him to lead fishing boats in the Adriatic, deliver ammunition to Yugoslav partisans, and save pilots who were allied. On one mission, he parachuted into Croatia, where Nazis were confronted by organized resistance. Due to his exceptional bravery, he was awarded the Silver Star. During those Balkan months, Antito gave out a medal. He formed anti-imperial opinions after witnessing the cruelty of battle. Following the war, he went back to Hollywood, but his psychological wounds caused him to briefly join the Communist Party. In contrast to acting, I believe that the war was the pinnacle of his life and the time when he felt fully alive. Dear listeners, Hayden's account brings back the glory and suffering of the wars that many of us in our generation fought in. When I first heard OSS directives, I felt like Odysseus adrift in perilous waters, he writes in Wanderer. His acting career began in 1940 by accident due to his good looks and 6'5" height. In movies like 1941's Virginia and Madeline Carroll's Bahama Passage, Virginia, Hayden made his acting debut, met his first wife, and played a supporting role in a movie about a man returning to Virginia. The romantic picture Bahama Passage, which was shot in the Bahamas and in which he fell in love with Carroll, was made by Hayden, who detested acting and only desired the sea. He was marketed by Paramount as the most attractive man in movies, and these early films, despite being forgotten, were the beginning. He showed bravery by leaving Hollywood to fight in the war. He had a complicated personal life. 3 weddings. 1942 to 1946, the first brief with Madeline Carroll. Second Stormy, Betty, and Danoon, and her 4 children are involved in a contentious custody dispute. In 1960, Catherine Devine McConnell, and her 2 children were finally stable. These connections were a reflection of late peace as well as turmoil, drunkenness, depression, and the Toronto marijuana arrest in 1981. Evaluation. Family provided assistance throughout storms. The English celebrity, Carol, married Hayden in 1942 but divorced him because he went to war, just like many post-war American families. Hayden later regretted her charitable work. They struggled over custody of Christian, Dana, Gretchen, and Matthew, clashed, and got divorced 3 times with Danone. Hayden broke a court order in 1959 by taking the children to Tahiti on the ship Wanderer. But with McConnell, it was an adventure. Recently had Andrew and David been living on a barge in France. She encouraged him to write and ultimately stood by him. The WAC-induced despair, Hayden's drinking from the war, and the marijuana case were only the beginning. He conquered it, nevertheless, by writing. He was born in 1916 in Montclair, New Jersey, and had a sad upbringing due to his father's early death and his mother's second marriage. After leaving to go to sea, Hayden became a young captain. He left Hollywood to pursue his actual passion, which was the sea. He traveled the world by sea. Captain at age 22 and second mate at age 17. A magazine photo brought him to Hollywood in 1938. From end-of-life secrets to crazy start, the entire voyage tells a cohesive tale. Reluctant actor, free sailor, philosopher in disguise, and conflicted guy. Let me go into further detail about Hayden's legacy, dear listeners. He wrote on the struggle for authenticity, political disappointment, and inner sorrow in Wanderer. The book is a cautionary tale about a conformist society in addition to being autobiographical. I see it as an emotional diary of an old soldier that evokes empathy in us at this age. He described his life as an impoverished kid, his escape to the sea, and Hollywood as a gilded jail. As the saying goes, I am a wanderer belonging nowhere. The 1896 epic marine novel Voyage is lauded for its rich realism and is based on real-life occurrences. He earned a nice living from his writings, but he griped about taxes and little things. Both of his books were bestsellers, and Hayden saw writing as his salvation. Now let's discuss Hollywood in those days. The film industry of the 1940s and 1950s was glitzy but brutal. Male performers had to be utterly manly. Any indication of homosexuality ruined careers. Despite his great stature, Hayden was internally conflicted and touted as a golden Viking. His covert liaisons with Webb, Perkins, and Mineo were not uncommon. Until his death, Hudson remained hidden. Clift had a battle with addiction. In contrast to Tab Hunter, who dated Perkins, wrote about secrets, or James Dean Mineo's friend, who was rumored to be gay. Old Hollywood is full of such stories, and Hayden at the end of his life dared to reveal, albeit late, that he was a sea voyager from New Jersey who lost his father, took his name, and dropped out of school to go to sea. As a personal perspective, this consequence of prejudice, love, and the shadows it pushes into the past, but it also reminds me of the advancements made in the present. After sailing from New England to the Caribbean, he gained knowledge of sails and engines. The captain of Tahiti in 1937 proposed to a local girl but chose not to get married. Bought the ship in 1939, but it was destroyed by a storm. Then Hollywood came from modeling. He detested Virginia, but he did meet Carol. Joined the Marines in 1941 and departed for war. Detail as OSS trainee John Hamilton learned parachuting espionage in Scotland. Controlled boats that brought weapons to Italy in 1943 for Tito. One night, Germans assaulted his ship, but he managed to flee. He coordinated the Balkan resistance and saved hundreds of pilots. Returned following the war. Burned at noon in 1947 and in western El Paso in 1949. But everything was altered by WAC. He gave testimony in 1951, named people, and kept his job, but he lost friends. After working as a detective during the crime wave in 1954, Good Noir, or terror in a Texas town in 1958, or in the indie western, where he faced Harpoon, he referred to it as treachery, which caused sadness. Despite being poorly known, this movie was strong. James Coburn and Eva Marie Saint signed a firm contract in 1969, and they traveled to Europe in 1970. The Godfather, Angel's Leap, returning to the United States, and Turnos Casseters in 1970. The Last Show, British sci-fi, aired in 1973. Deadly Strangers, a comedy by Topola Colt, was released in 1975. In 1976, Bertolucci, 1900. Marxist, peasant epic. In Jaws, he rejected Quint because of taxes. TV, 1973's Canadian sci-fi series The Star Lost. Banachek, George Peppard, detective comedy, as Old Man. The Civil War miniseries The Blue and the Gray, 1982. As John Brown. Hayden was conflicted from an emotional standpoint. Enjoyed seeing, but confined to Hollywood. Hero turned traitor. Addict, parent, and husband. Complexity was increased by covert romances. In the dark, he investigated himself. At 70, this encourages and teaches authenticity. Hayden's story serves as a reminder to listeners that one can still attain inner freedom at any age. Secrets add humanity rather than devalue something. Think about his transformation from sailor to writer, spy, and fame. A traveler recounts a vacation to Tahiti with children, a court infraction, and ultimate serenity. Living on a yacht in France, he penned the 700-page marine romance Voyage in 1896, which became a bestseller and was hailed as a modern-day Moby Dick. Unlike Bogart or Cooper, Hayden detested celebrity and believed that acting was a necessary evil. In interviews, he claimed that the sea is bliss and Hollywood is hell. He was portrayed in Pharaohs of Chaos, sipping a cigar and narrating anecdotes like a philosopher in Sausalito. Finally, listeners, there is a lesson to be learned from Hayden's narrative. Live authentically, even at the end of your life. Despite their shock value, romantic secrets are a natural element of human nature. Thank you for listening. Enjoy and subscribe if you enjoy. I hope you find serenity. Goodbye.